Meet John Wang, who got rejected from top colleges and now wants to be used as a prop by conservative media to blame black people for it. Wang couldn't get into Princeton, Caltech, MIT, Harvard, Carnegie Mellon, or UC Berkeley. He thinks because he got a 1590 on the SATs and good grades, he's entitled to a spot, apparently. But the logic is so flawed because there are more applicants with 1600s on the SATs than Harvard can even accept, and John didn't even get a 1600. So playing by his rules he loses, and playing by the regular rules he loses because getting good grades and good test scores, as we've known for decades, is not enough to get into top colleges. This kid sounds like a very lost cliche. And the kicker of all of this is that UC Berkeley actually is prohibited from using race-conscious admissions. The state of California has banned this practice for public universities. So it didn't even apply. He got rejected for other reasons, like not being interesting enough.
It's almost like the discrimination faced by Asian Americans in college admissions never had anything to do with black students or affirmative action, and had everything to do with legacy admissions and the choices that colleges make to discriminate against Asian Americans in order to give preferential treatment to lesser qualified white students. If only black people had tried to warn us. Oh wait, they did.
Hi guys, welcome back to our channel. In case you're new here, my name is Maren.
And I'm Maureen. So in today's episode, we're going to be talking about an Asian American who's been going viral because he wanted affirmative action in America to be done away with.
Right, and why does John Wang want affirmative action to be done with? According to John, he feels like a lot of Asians are denied prestigious opportunities to get into prestigious colleges because according to him, black people...
He blames affirmative action as having given black people more opportunities than Asian people.
Right, and from what I understand, guys, and from what we will see from these clips, the way they explain it, how I understood it is basically not just your grades help you get into these prestigious colleges. They look at other things like extracurricular activities. Are you a leader? What kind of follower are you? How do you support people? You know.
Yeah, and his community came out for him. They tore him to pieces, and most of them actually support affirmative action being maintained, and most of them tell him that it is not black people's fault that he didn't get into these schools that he wanted to get into. But what are we talking about? Let's watch this video and then you come back and talk about it. Please leave us a comment on what you think about this episode, and you can also consider subscribing if you're new to this channel. Let's watch.
Let's yap about how Asian Americans fucked up affirmative action. Guys, I'm running on a broken nail and a Celsius, and I'm so angry. The worst part was that this was just a part of some ploy from a white man. There are three things that are important to talk about in this case. Number one, it's important to understand what affirmative action is. Two, how white supremacy actually pits people of color against each other, and Asian Americans, I'm looking at you and your fucking dumbasses. And the interesting dynamic of Asian Americans with other POC communities, particularly the black community. So, what's affirmative action? Affirmative action is a policy that came about during the civil rights era that sets systematic procedures within federal policy to ensure that historically marginalized groups were given opportunities for advancement and inclusion, particularly within college admissions. What I want everyone watching this to understand is that affirmative action, contrary to popular belief, is not a ticket into college, especially if you are a person of color. It's not. In fact, affirmative action was actually created just to ensure that white legacy kids weren't the only people given opportunities to actually succeed in white society. Because of a lot of black activists during the civil rights era, all people, not just black people within the United States now actually had a chance of doing well in America.
I'm Asian American, and this will be controversial, but I hope you'll hear me out to the end. I attended Harvard twice for undergrad and for business school, and I fully support affirmative action and need to address this false narrative that Asians don't want affirmative action. I resent my race being hijacked to make a case for ending diversity. The Asian American admissions experience has been a primary focus of the current Supreme Court lawsuit, which I really resent because it's been orchestrated by Edward Bloom, a white man who has a track record of wanting to end diversity and inclusion in other areas of American life as well. You know, he initially took a white plaintiff before to the Supreme Court against the University of Texas and failed. And so he decided he needed Asian plaintiffs, and so he advertised for them. And now Asian Americans are being used as a wedge against other communities of color. The Harvard Asian American Association and the Asian Alumni Association are both pro-affirmative action Harvard cannot create a campus that is diverse enough to fulfill its educational mission without considering race is just one factor among many factors. I mean, we've seen massive declines in minority admissions at universities when affirmative action is eliminated.
Now, affirmative action was already deeply unpopular because anytime white people have to share something that should be for the rest of us, they get a little bit, bitchy. It also upset a lot of people from the Asian American community, particularly because of two things. One was because a lot of people grew up under the model minority myth, which was this myth that led a lot of us to believe that we were the exception, that we were, the good minority that just followed through with all of the rules and procedures that white people had already set for us. And the second thing is just the idea of the American dream. A lot of Asian people just happen to be immigrants, not all of us, of course, but it also essentially allowed us to believe that, if we worked hard, we would get it. Obviously, that's not true. I work really hard and all I have is anxiety and depression. The federal ruling for affirmative action starts to collapse when this 18-year-old named John Wang, who has a 1590 SAT score and a very good GPA, gets really butthurt about the fact that he didn't get to a bunch of elitist schools. And he starts talking about this a lot on media, and he basically claims that the reason that he didn't get into these schools is because he's Asian American. Now, I don't think that this is entirely untrue because I do believe that people of color in general have a harder time getting into more traditional elitist schools. However, the issue that I have with this little twat is that he claimed that African Americans actually have an easier time getting into these schools because of affirmative action. He ends up going to this organization called the Students for Fair Admissions that basically is just this whole thing that's against affirmative action entirely and has been since it was ever created. What happens is that they give him this calculator and basically tell him that with his stats, if he was a black person, he would have a 95% chance of getting admitted into Harvard. Truly? Where are they finding this calculator and where can I destroy it? Because that doesn't even make any sense. The case eventually gets picked up by someone named Edward Blum, who is the head of Students for Fair Admissions. Not only is he the head of this dumbass organization, he's also a white Republican litigator who literally has decades worth of experience trying to dismantle everything that happened within the civil rights era because he just hates people of color that much. Particularly, this man has been looking, searching, desperately praying for a reason to dismantle affirmative action. And the funniest thing is that he doesn't even have actual experience as a litigator. He is professionally known as an amateur litigator who just doesn't like people of color and seeing us winning, apparently. Him and his groupies at his little org basically take all of these testimonies from Asian American people like John Wang and create a case against Harvard that he takes all the way to the Supreme Court to essentially argue that affirmative action is actually discriminatory against Asian Americans and the rest of the population. And it's so embarrassing at the fact that Asian Americans were getting used by this white man and we fell for it. We fell for it so hard because of the internal racism that we have within ourselves. But when I say ourselves, Asian American community, you know which particular one I'm talking about. You know which subset I'm angry at. In June of 2023, the Supreme Court decides to side with Edward Blum and says that affirmative action is actually unconstitutional under the Equal Protection Act of the 14th Amendment. So basically, this little white man, he gets his way simply just because Asian Americans don't know how to use critical thinking when it comes to this and realizing that this actually isn't going to help us out in the long run. Edward Blum dismantles decades of hard work done by black activists to make sure that not only their community, but the rest of us are set to go when it comes to college admissions. Make it a little bit more fair, because it's never gonna actually be equal, but at least make it a little bit better. And we fell for it. We fell for it because Asian Americans sometimes were idiots. There was this survey done with Asian Americans in college, and it turns out that an overwhelming majority of us actually support affirmative action and understand why it's important. It's just a small portion of our community that just decides to scream the loudest because they still have it in their head that we are the model minority, that we have to follow through with the American dream. I also feel like it erases a lot of the actual very intense history Asian Americans have with activism within the United States, particularly in conjunction and in gratitude with the black community. Think about Yellow Peril supports black power during the civil rights era, and the black community support of Asian Americans during protests against the Vietnam War. And as a gay Filipino first-gen American, I remember hearing about this court case and essentially crying when I found out that affirmative action was going to get repealed. Not having affirmative action basically protects people who would rather not see people like me enter into spaces where we can actually enact change for the better. It protects people like Edward Blum who want to make sure that our country stays a white supremacist country. And for Asian Americans, those that are watching this that have come to believe that, Black people are taking all of the opportunity away from us, they're not. There is someone who's doing that. Things aren't going to change because you worked hard. Things are going to change because you realize that the system that you're working under is inherently not made for you. And there are people that want to change that. You just have to open up your mindset. Edward Blum. Edward Blum. If I am going to hell, I am going to make sure to drag you down with me.
And higher education and these institutions are pipelines to leadership in our society, a society that's still, unfortunately, far from equal and just, one that still has a lot of work to do to close racial disparities and combat systemic racism, one that all of that became painfully clear for this nation with the Black Lives Matter movement. There are racial disparities in education going back centuries in this country, and today, if you're Black, you're more likely to be in an under-resourced school, but also more likely to be viewed as having less academic potential. I mean, yes, in an ideal world, race wouldn't be considered in admissions because in that ideal world, everyone would have access to the same kinds of resources and there'd be no systemic racism. But that is unfortunately not the world yet that we live in today. So what can we do now? I mean, it unfortunately does seem inevitable that affirmative action will be struck down this year. So what's the point of all of this? For one, I think it's important for Asian Americans to speak out versus just simply being used as a pawn in a political battle.
Okay, so I'm pretty sure everyone knows about this, but one of the schools that he's complaining he didn't get into because he's Asian was Berkeley. Berkeley is 40% Asian. I'm pretty sure he didn't get in because he's boring and had no extracurriculars. Girl!
Oh, look at that. Asian Americans signing on to be used as tools of white supremacy to dismantle affirmative action did nothing to address the discrimination faced by Asian Americans in college admissions. Because dismantling affirmative action didn't address the fact that selective colleges admit Asian American applicants at a rate 28% less than similarly qualified white applicants. It's almost like the discrimination faced by Asian Americans in college admissions never had anything to do with Black students or affirmative action, and had everything to do with legacy admissions and the choices that colleges make to discriminate against Asian Americans in order to give preferential treatment to lesser qualified white students. If only Black people had tried to warn us. Oh wait, they did.
There's anti-Asian bias.
Harvard rated Asian Americans on personality, right, on subjective factors like likability and courage lower.
When comparing applicants with the same level of academic achievement, Asians always had the worst personality scores of any group. So either Asian Americans really have worse personalities or the university is biased against them. But interviewers actually gave them personal ratings comparable to those of whites. This bias might relate to those internet comments where people say, we only do something because we're Asian. We only get this because we're Asian.
So guys, welcome back. Let us know what you think about this episode on the comment section. One thing I have to agree with all the speakers of the videos we played you is that we can all agree when they say that the Asian community is allowing themselves to be used by white supremacists to take away systems that Black Americans and people of color have been fighting for a long time, in order for them to be included, because I'm like, if affirmative action is something that was meant to allow people, minority people to be included, if this system is taken away, who stands to benefit?
Right, and if you even see the person who helped him get the case to court, it was a white man who's famously known for being an amateur litigator, Yeah.
And guys, when you look at this also, I'm asking myself, is it just a case of, a sore loser? Because as some of these speakers have said, even someone who went to a prestigious university university herself has
to
come out.
actually one of the universities he
Right.
was denied entry.
And they've come out to say that these universities are very, very, very competitive. So if you got a very, very good grade and you are hoping to get into these universities, right? I do believe competition for real is tough in this kind of colleges, right? So you imagine you're only coming with your good grades, but someone is coming with their good grades and good leadership qualities
And talent as well.
And a good personality, and the kind of people you're going up against, they're very, very formidable competitors in terms of other things past the good grades that you're carrying, you know. So me personally, if you ask me, I feel like this is just a sore loser who couldn't accept that there was other people who are better than him
who are called to all these universities that he wanted to get into. And after he took the case to court, I hear there's another university that called him, that a university that is quite good at technology. And after he was called to that university, he never retracted his statements about affirmative action. Right now he's gone mute. Yeah, meaning he was just using this affirmative action case to get what he wanted, or to leverage something out of all these universities that rejected his application.
Right.
You know?
And you know, the good thing nowadays I normally see with the Asian community is that it's not all of them who normally jump on this kind of bad behavior. If their own people are doing wrong, I feel like a lot of them recognize and they see the position they hold in society, meaning that they don't support such people who try and, you know, demolish systems that have been fought for so hard by black people or people of color. You understand? Because if black people are fighting for it to benefit them, then
it also benefits
the Asian community and people of color, you know. So I'm just glad that other people in the community nowadays, they don't just sit down, keep quiet, and, you know,
they actually understand the fact that if black people are fighting for something, it's for the good of everybody. And I think it's not only some Asians in the Asian community. I think even some white people have started waking up to this fact that if a black American person is fighting for something, in the long run it benefits even people of color and white people, especially white women. You know, yeah, right now I think all of them are starting to realize that fact.
And guys, can we just talk about the fact that how laughable it is that this guy is saying that he misses opportunities because of black people? Guys, let's just sit back and picture this for a moment. How laughable is that statement? You know, if you're looking for someone to blame in society, you shouldn't be looking back to blame. Look at who has placed these systems in place. It's not like he doesn't know. These are things he knows. So I feel like, what do they call it when this person does a mistake to you, and because
you can't get them, you project to the next person you perceive as weak.
Right. And you're both in the same boat, they're treating you the same, but instead of calling out the true perpetrator, you want to call out the next, let me just say victim, because both of you are victims, but you don't want to see that. You want to find a reason to call out the person you're in the same boat with, instead of the person who's steering the ship.
Yeah, as a young girl here said that Asians, they were so used to, back in the day, I don't know if it still happens, you live with Asian Americans in America, you can tell us. She said that Asians, for the longest time, in order to fall in line, or in order to fall in the good graces of white people, they had to behave good and follow the systems that the white person had laid for America in order for them. And then that is how they were also pitted against African Americans, because African Americans are fighters. Them, they don't just take the system they find there. They ask, why is this system here? Who does it benefit? Does it benefit us? But Asians, for the most part, they're known to comply with these systems. And that is why I feel like that is why the white America has given them a leg up compared to black Americans. You get what I'm saying? Yeah, and that is why I feel like this guy was doing this so that he can play into that role of being compliant or seeing eye to eye with white people.
That makes sense. Anyway, guys, let us know what you think about this episode on the comment section. We'd really love to hear your thoughts on this. And what do you think, guys, if, let's say, America gets to a point where they totally and completely do away with the affirmative action? And for the Asian Americans who live in America and have benefited through these systems, what are your thoughts on these? And what would you like to tell John Wang? Should he happen to, assume he's in front of you, what would you like John Wang to know?
Right, guys, please let us know. Would America be better with affirmative action, or would it be better without affirmative action?
Although I feel like personally I already know the answer to that.
Well, I'm just interested to see what our audience think, because you know, at the end of the day, they have to live with the system with affirmative action versus without affirmative action. Yeah, so does it help now that it exists? And if it ceases to exist, would it be more helpful or more harmful? Yeah, please let us know what you think about this episode. Also consider subscribing if you've not, and we'll see you on our next episode.